I want to get hyped up and energized. So I listen to music that I would always want to dance to anytime I hear it. I have a pre-presentation playlist. I will play that music and that gets me in a hyped up, energized frame of mind. I was driving, I was by myself in my car. I was listening to Mariah Carey's song. I was singing with her. I pulled up at a stoplight, and on one side of me was a car of black women. On the other side of me was a car of white women. And out of nowhere, I flipped out because I wasn't sure who I should try to be the same as. Should I try to fit in with the black women in this car, or should I try to fit in with the white women in this car? You are absolutely right that it is a natural behavior for us to compare ourselves to others. I am a biracial woman. My biological father was black, my biological mother was white, and I'm adopted by a white family. I've always known that I'm adopted and I'm very loved in my family. When I was a little girl, we lived in a white neighborhood, predominantly white neighborhood. I was really good friends with my next door neighbor, who was 7 years old. I was 5, she was 7. One of the things that she would say is, "You don't belong here, Wendy. You're different." I wonder if they think that I'm smart. What about me? What do I think?
Hello folks, I'm Lou, and in this episode we have Sid in conversation with Professor Wendy Corbett, who's a professor of management at Duke University. She has been researching on the topic of belongingness for more than 10 years. We have 3 main topics to discuss in this episode. Number 1, what is belonging and what does it mean with respect to oneself, their social circles, and their professional life? Number 2, we discuss Professor Wendy's experience with meeting her role model, former US President Barack Obama. And number 3, what it takes to present effectively.
आज की ताज़ा खबर। बेंगलुरु में रहने वाले लू और अमेरिका में रहने वाले सिड आपसे कुछ बात करना चाहते हैं। संगीतकार राजेश के साथ आपका स्वागत है लूसिड में।
So, Professor Wendy, let's get started. I think belongingness, the word, the term, everyone knows about it, everyone knows the general term, but there's so much depth into that word. Let's begin with like the definition of belongingness. What is belongingness?
That's actually one of the questions I sought out to answer when I started my path into what creates a sense of belonging in our world. And what I found is that from all of the sources that I looked at, that pretty much everybody had their own definition of belonging. And what I found is that I couldn't find one that captured everything that I thought needed to be a part of it. So I created my own definition of belonging that pulls from multiple sources. For me, that definition is belonging is that sense of safety and security that results when we feel valued, when we feel seen and heard by the people around us, and when we are part of something that is meaningful, that is larger than ourselves. So that's the definition that I use in my research and in my work with organizations and with people.
Right. That's really interesting. I think like the main terms I get out of that is like safety, value, and like meaningfulness. And like me coming from India, I've stayed a better part of my life in one city, in one locality, where I think I've taken like safety and like value for granted. Like I've never thought about it in depth. Why did you think about like belongingness and seek out like to understand more about belongingness?
Well, I actually started looking at belonging from my own personal experience. Sort of, I'm the center of the radar or of the ripple effect. So I actually started looking at belonging from my own personal perspective. I realized that I had a voice in my head that told me that if there's ever a time where you think that I'm different from you, then I wouldn't belong. And
Right.
that voice ruled every behavior, every decision I made for more than 35 years.
Right.
I was always terrified that I would not belong. And as I discovered that voice, as I started to combat that voice and counter what that voice was telling me, I realized how much energy and how much of my focus was spent in your head trying to figure out how you saw me so
Right.
that I could be the same as you, so that I could change my behavior or the clothes that I wore, my values, so that I could convince you that we were the same. That takes up a tremendous amount of energy. So as I discovered that and started working on creating my own voice that's louder than the other voice, I started to feel so much lighter. And I really started becoming who I really am, not who you are. And I really blossomed and became myself.
Right.
And I realized that this happens with many of us. So I wanted to start sharing my experience so that other people who had similar experiences could find the courage to maybe do it themselves. That got me interested in what we can do for ourselves to help us feel like we belong. I also, with my background in organizational psychology, which is essentially the psychology of the workplace, I got interested in what creates a culture of belonging at work. So I started looking outward beyond myself and started studying what are the specific behaviors that we can do or not do to create that sense of security, that sense of value, to help others feel safe to be who they are. And so that is how I got interested in what creates a culture of belonging at work and beyond.
Right. So what I'm understanding from what you said so far is like a voice that says like, hey, like this person is different. He or she is very different from me, and I seek validation in terms of what that person thinks of me. And I think generally this starts from school. Like, I've thought about this, like when you say that, hey, like this person dresses like this, or this person speaks like this. I think I've done, especially with respect to handwriting. Like, we used to write a lot of notes. I would see other people who would write beautiful notes, and I'm like, why am I not writing like that, and try to copy that? So, don't you think it's like human behavior to think that way, like, hey, like, this person is doing something very nice, or like wearing better clothes, I want to copy that, or emulate that? So how do we know if this is like fine or not fine? Like, how do you differentiate that?
You are absolutely right that it is a natural behavior for us to sort of compare ourselves to others.
Yeah.
That in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's part of what we do as social beings. Where it becomes unhealthy is where we derive our value based on others,
Right.
more so than ourselves.
Right.
So at that point it becomes unhealthy.
Got it. That's very interesting. So that's a very interesting point where, like, as you said, like you don't try to value yourself from others. You try to seek validation from, like, say, your inner self, or like based on what you think about yourself. From your personal journey, like as you said, like you created a voice that was louder than the voice which said that, hey, you're different from others. How did you go about understanding, like what was your journey like there, where you had to create like a louder voice?
Well, I want to be clear that yes, my voice is louder than the other voice,
Yeah.
but that other voice is still there.
Correct.
And for me, to tell you a little bit about my story and where that voice comes from, I am in my early 50s. I am a biracial woman. My biological father was black. My biological mother was white. And I'm adopted by a white family. I've always known that I'm adopted and I'm very loved in my family. My concern about not feeling like I belong doesn't come from my family. What happened was when I was a little girl, we lived in a white neighborhood, predominantly white neighborhood, and I was really good friends with my next door neighbor, who was 7 years old. I was 5, she was 7. And we would play all the time. And, we were great friends until we got into a fight, and then we would bicker at each other. One of the things that she would say is, "You don't belong here, Wendy. You're different." And I internalized that. I didn't realize this, but that became my guiding belief. That is the voice in my head. When I discovered that voice and whose it was, and I realized that my own little voice was really tiny, just a little whisper, I started to practice using my voice whenever I heard Laura. The voice is that of a girl named Laura. So what I did to build up my voice is anytime I would start to think, oh, I wonder if they think that I'm smart. Do they think that I'm, pretty? Do they think that I'm rich? Whatever that, do they think I'm fill in the blank? That's a cue for me that I'm thinking too much about what you think about me.
Right.
So when I hear that voice saying, I wonder if they think I'm fill in the blank, my own voice will come back and say, what about me? What do I think I am? And that helps me kind of shush the other voice, the unhealthy voice. So that's the practice that I started using a cue. And my cue is when I start thinking too much about what other people think about me. Not all the time, but when I realize it too much and when I start to worry about it.
Right.
That is a sign for me that I'm thinking too much about what other people think about me.
Right. So, what are your thoughts on like currently with the rise of social media? Like people are always on their phones, people are looking at others' stories, Instagram stories, what they are doing in their professional lives, personal lives. There's always this constant comparison, like, hey, this person's got the job here or moved to this beautiful place. So, uh, isn't it difficult to always have that voice say like what do I want, because there's always like social media or like some other source which shows like hey like there's always that bit of constant comparison, so it takes a lot of hard work, like a lot of effort to get your voice and be like hey what do I actually want. So how do you do that?
What encourages me is that when I start comparing myself to others, I feel emotionally heavy,
Right.
not weight wise, but it's painful. It's a weight. That's not a good sign. When I start thinking, what do I want? What do I think about me? I automatically feel lighter. So that's the feeling that I want. For me, I find that the more I compare myself to others, the less happy I am. And
Right.
I have a choice. I can't stop you from comparing me to other people,
True.
but I can control me comparing me to other people. And
Right.
that's, I spend very little energy when I'm in a good space. I spend very little energy trying to think about who you are comparing me to or what you're comparing me to, and try to focus on being the best person I can be based on my own criteria and not yours.
Got it. And I think at the start of this podcast, you set a definition of belongingness, and you said that you went around, you researched, and you saw that multiple people had multiple definitions. So, what were some like interesting insights or shocking insights that you saw about like communities thinking about belongingness?
Well, what I've found really interesting in my research is, and the reason I started on my research, which is focused on identifying specific behaviors that contribute to a sense of belonging in a community.
Right.
What I discovered is that not what surprised me is that instead of these being the behaviors being big, huge, expensive, magnanimous, send you to a week-long trip in Tahiti to build belonging, to say that we care about you or that we value you, it's actually the whole totally other end of the spectrum. It is the tiny behaviors, the simple acts, the simple practices that we do with each other that show that you see me as a person, that you value what I have to say. So that's been a big surprise. Whereas I thought I was going to come up with this and surface this list of big behaviors that organizations could initiate or implement to build a sense of belonging in their organizational culture. It's actually simple behaviors like making eye contact, like nodding to show that you're listening, that to show that you hear what I'm saying, where you demonstrate that you're interested in me. So that's been a really big surprise.
And what has been like the top behavior that's helped people to feel a sense of belonging with each other?
So what I found in my research as I was reading, listening to podcasts, and absorbing and processing a lot of the information that's already out there on belonging, what I found is that there is a lot of ingredients that go into creating a sense of belonging, and they can be very different depending on the industry, depending on the size of the company, depending on a lot of things. But what I found that is consistent is that for us to feel a sense of belonging, we need to feel connected to the people around us. That's our peers and our leaders. We need to feel respected. We need to feel that what we bring to the table, what we contribute, makes a difference, and you know that it makes a difference. So we need to feel connected, we need to feel respected, and we need to feel protected or safe to say, I don't know, or to say, I need some help,
Right.
or to say, I made a mistake.
Right.
So the behaviors any behaviors that build connection, that say, I see you, I hear you, I'm interested in you as a person, not just as an employee, not just as a leader, but as a human being. Those are the behaviors that build belonging. And one of the ways that I'm doing research is with a survey. And I specifically, intentionally ask open-ended questions. I ask for a simple example of what's something that your colleagues do or your leaders do that make you feel more connected to them.
Right.
And there are lots of answers to that, but one of the most common ones is I feel connected to the people I work with when we talk about stuff that's not work. And so that's one of the most common responses, is I really like when we talk about non-work stuff.
I think that is so true because after my undergrad, I worked in a semiconductor company where most of the people in my team were like 10 years older to me. So the conversations they were having were very different. They were talking about kids, schools, etc. And I had no common topic. So I always felt disconnected. So I think that is very true, where like, talking to other people and sharing those small conversations, like the water cooler conversations, I think really, really helps. And I was watching one of your videos, and the other important behavior that you spoke about was the act of listening. Like, listening helps people feel more connected, more belonging to an organization or to a team. Why do you think listening is so hard for people in general?
I think that listening is one of the greatest gifts that we can give someone. It's specifically or in part because of what you just described. It's really hard for us to listen. We have a lot of distractions. We've got a phone ringing, we've got text coming through the phone, we've got email beeping at us, we've got 15 browsers open, all of them wanting to give us more information.
Right.
So when we can set all of that aside and give someone our attention, it is a huge gift that they receive. As it shows that we respect you, and it's a way for us to connect because we're actually listening.
Right.
It's sad that I'm known as a great listener, and I'm kind of sad that it stands out so much, because I wish more people knew the value of setting aside, everything else, closing the computer, making eye contact, putting your phone out of view for yourself and for the person you're speaking with. All of that goes a long way to say, I'm giving you my undivided attention. I
Right.
think that listening, giving someone the gift of listening, is giving them your full attention. And when we've got so much fighting for our attention, when we can give that attention to a person, it conveys a lot.
So how do you make sure that you always give your undivided attention? As you said, people praise you for being a great listener. Apart from keeping your phone aside, what additional things do you do to make sure that you're listening to them intently?
I close my browsers. I close my computer. If we weren't talking via computer right now, I would have my computer closed. I will sometimes take notes. So if you're in the middle of a story and I hear something that I want to ask you about,
Right.
I won't interrupt you, but I may make a note of it and come back to it. Because I do that, I may also at the beginning of our conversation say, you may notice me looking down for a moment. I'm just taking a quick note because there's something I want to go back to. So I
Right.
let you know that if momentarily we break eye contact, that's why.
Got it. Got
I
it.
also ask questions. I'm listening, and so I ask you questions that help me learn more about you and your experience.
Right, right, yeah. I think the major problem that at least kids of my generation have is keeping your phone aside, keeping your laptop aside, and like just watching them and making that eye contact. I think that's very important to learn, definitely. And going back to the topic of belongingness again, going up one step above, when I think about belongingness, there's like, belongingness to the self, like, do I actually belong in this planet? And then there's like belongingness with friends, like, am I actually part of this friend group? And the third one is like, belongingness to the workplace, right? Am I actually connected? Do I feel connected to the workplace? What I want to do is like go through each one of them because I feel like there's so much to uncover. Because when I came to Duke, I came from India. It was my first time coming to a new country, and I was all over the place because I had no clue about the people here, the culture here, so I had to learn a lot. So I want to start with personal belongingness. Like, how do you make sure that you always feel, feel one with like yourself?
For me, what I focus on in terms of belonging from a personal perspective, it's part of it is faith that I am here for a purpose, that
Right.
there is a reason that I'm here. For some people, that reason or that purpose comes from a religious or a spiritual perspective. For me, it comes from, in part, from faith in the universe that there is a reason that I'm here, and I'm tapped into that reason. So it's part of it. When I question whether I belong somewhere, I first remind myself that it's okay to question it. I'm a strong person. I'm a confident person. So sometimes when that little voice that tells me I don't belong, I may sometimes want to bop myself over the head of, come on, Wendy. So I may judge myself for not
Right.
being stronger. So to counter that, I focus on soothing my spirit to remind myself that I am a human being, which means that I have the whole range of emotions, and questioning whether I belong, and sometimes being anxious, questioning whether I belong somewhere, is just shows that I'm human, and that's okay.
Right.
And so part of my message when I speak, when I do my professional speaking, is wanting to convey that message that even for people who are confident, people who are leaders, people who are professional speakers, if you end up in a situation where you question your own sense of belonging, not to judge yourself for it, but to handle yourself with grace.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that was actually really helpful. Thank you so much. And like the second part I want to go into is like social belongingness, like say with your family, friends, etc. Where like especially as you grow older, like the number of friends you have become lesser. There are more social circles, but like very few close friends. So how do you deal with belongingness in a social setting?
I look for real ways to connect with others. You're going to see a theme. The connect, respect, and protect is a
Right.
constant theme in our personal sense of belonging, our social sense of belonging, and our work sense of belonging. So I look for ways to deepen connection. To I look for ways to say thank you, to demonstrate appreciation for friendship and for kind things that people do for me. And I look to create a safe space where we can share our imperfections, and I can say what I can't believe I messed up, and can share a mistake, share a
Right.
doubt with others, and be vulnerable,
Right.
because I find that being vulnerable with others deepens that sense of connection, and deepens trust among people.
Right.
So another way that in a social situation, another way that I look to build belonging is to be trustworthy. Nowadays, we can do lots to tell people's secrets with social media and email threads. So I always aim to be trustworthy and not share information that isn't mine to share,
Right.
especially simply to get a like or a thumbs up on social media.
Very interesting, yeah. When you talk about sharing like real things to be more connected, what do you mean by real things?
I mean, something other than the fact that I like pistachio ice cream. something beyond surface. And so when I work with organizations, one of the ways that we explore practices that they might implement to help build a sense of belonging is to have what I call meaningful conversations. And what I mean by that is sharing a prompt that says, one of the most meaningful experiences I've had since I've worked here is, and then that's a real conversation. That's not a surface conversation. And when someone shares something that's meaningful for them, that can naturally ignite a conversation that deepens connection.
That is true, right? So I think like the counterfact for this is like with respect to meaningful conversations is sometimes there are few people who deeply believe in this, and every time they want to have a meaningful conversation with another person, it's like, hey, like, there should be some substance in this conversation if we are having it. We shouldn't have like conversations for fun and stuff like that. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
I think all kinds of conversations, when they're used appropriately, can deepen connection. Even if we're talking about work, even if we're talking about something that's that is professional or that is sort of higher level, kind of surfacey, we can still be genuine. We can still demonstrate interest. We can still ask questions. Not everything has to be that deep, meaningful conversation.
Right, makes sense, yeah. And the last part, which I want to talk about in depth in these three things, was in terms of belongingness within a workplace. You've done a lot of work with leaders to incorporate this into their cultures. So, what do you think is missing in like organizations or like within leadership to inculcate that belongingness? Like, what do you think is missing?
What I see with many of the organizations that I work with, and particularly with the leaders in those organizations, is that many leaders think that for them to build a sense of belonging in their workplace, it's going to take this huge, long, organization-wide cultural transformation initiative,
Right.
which will take years to plan. And that's not the case. So that's one of the reasons why I'm undertaking my research to identify the specific small, simple behaviors that build belonging, because I want to counter that thought that it's too big to it is too big to address. We don't have the time, we don't have the budget, or the resources to address, to build a sense of belonging, because we don't have time to create this huge transformation, this huge cultural transformation. 2 minutes at the beginning of a meeting where we do a genuine connection, where we ask how people are doing, where we ask one person to share something meaningful that they've experienced in their life in the past week. 2 minutes and at an occasional meeting can go a long way to build connection, respect, and a sense of psychological safety at work.
That is so true. I think recently I did an internship at this company called Life 360, and every 2 weeks we had a product weekly meeting. And the director, whenever he starts his meeting, he either starts out with a joke, or he talks about like how his daughter bumped his car or crashed his car, and asks like what others are doing, and then starts the meeting, which is always on a lighter note. I think it reduces that cognitive like load on your brain. Is like, oh, this is going to be a serious meeting, I have to concentrate. I think that it always lightens and improves the connection. That is so true. And the question I have here is, when you consult with these leaders and you say about these like simple things, right? Like as you said, like the first 2 minutes, use it to have that connection. People are generally hard to change. Like people don't change so easily, and when you tell such behaviors, people feel it might be forced. Like, why am I doing it? I'm doing it out of compulsion. I actually don't care what they did during their weekends. So why don't we just get on to the meeting? Like, how do you tackle that?
One of the things that I do when I work with leaders and organizations is many times they come to me and say, we want to build a sense of belonging with our direct reports. So,
Right.
the leaders are here looking at how to build connection here or how to build
Right.
belonging here.
Right.
I always start with the leaders. So when I do leadership retreats, one of the things I do is I will survey the leaders and I get examples from them, specific examples from them. And as part of the program that we do together, they see anonymously, they see examples of what it is that their colleagues do, people sitting around this table, what it is that they do that means a lot to them, that contributes to building a sense of belonging. And one of the questions I ask is, I ask the leaders to complete this statement. I feel vulnerable or unprotected at work when, and then they fill in the blank. When I share those examples with the leaders, they are astonished that
Right.
there is a lack of belonging at this table because they came into the room thinking, oh, we're gonna focus outward. We're gonna focus on our direct reports when you've got to start in the leadership circle. So
Right.
that experience opens their eyes to seeing that how prevalent a lack of belonging is and how important it is and what the simple behaviors are, like sending someone a quick email or a text saying did a great job on that presentation, or can I get your thoughts? I'm struggling with this idea. I really appreciate
Right.
your perspective. Can you give me 5 minutes to let me know your thoughts? So
Right.
when they see that there is a sense of belonging, there are some things that where there is a strong sense of belonging at the leadership table, but there are also some things that they need to work on. That their own experience helps them shift their perspective for the value of a sense of belonging and how it can contribute to employees wanting to stay longer, employee loyalty, employee engagement, productivity, innovation. When employees feel like they belong, they will go that extra mile. They will choose to go the extra mile. And who doesn't need employees who are willing to go the extra mile instead of continually dealing with turnover and the time it takes to find new people, the time it takes to bring them on board, the time it takes to ramp them up to get them to the point where they are contributing to the goals of the organization.
That is true. Could you give a specific example of how do you do this? Like, say I'm a company, I come to you and say, hey, I don't feel like there's enough belongingness with my team, and I need your help. Like, what is the process you go through?
Yeah, I can use a company that I'm working with now. I'll leave it at that. It's a small company, but what we're doing is we're working with many of the employees at different levels. And we've scheduled some workshops. And what happens is before the workshop, everyone who's attending it will complete a survey.
Right.
Then as part of the program, as part of the workshop, we define what belonging is. We do some small group discussions about how belonging shows up in your workday. And then I share with them 5 of the most common responses from the over 1,000 survey results that I have so far. Here are 5 of the most common ways that other survey takers have said, that their colleagues, 5 of the most common things that their colleagues or leaders do that help them feel connected. I will show them 5 of the most common from the over 1,000 survey results. And then I will also show them 5 interesting results from their survey responses. So they see 5 responses from that people in the room sitting around the table have shared. So it's really helpful for them to see survey results, from beyond their work,
Right.
but it is incredibly insightful for them to see, oh my gosh, I had no idea that someone in this room feels like they've been thrown under the bus.
Right.
So it's powerful for participants in the program to see examples from their own world. And so we look at some of those responses, and then we kind of reverse engineer. And as a group, we come up with some specific things that they can do. They can add to meeting agendas. They can set aside time once a month for Facepalm Fridays, or what other things they can do that will generate stronger opportunities to connect, respect, and protect.
Right. And do you think with the shift of work to remote work has increased the need of belongingness within employees, and more companies and more leaders are looking for different ways to make sure that belongingness happens?
I do think that belonging is increasingly important today. It is true for people who work in an office building. It is also true for remote workers. It's also true for hybrid workers. So yes, our overall need to focus on a sense of belonging is definitely increased lately.
Right.
And what was the other? There was another part of the question that I think of.
No, that was it. And the other question I had, I think this is the last question before we move on to other topics apart from belongingness, is were there any experiences that you had where people thought that there was a sense of belongingness missing, but like when you worked on that project and consulted on that project, like it was actually not belongingness that was missing, it was totally different, like something else that was happening? Did you have any experience as such?
I do. I actually worked with a company with the senior leaders, global senior leaders in a company. And they wanted to focus on building a sense of belonging among their direct reports. But I focused on the leaders first. And in that leadership retreat, there was an employee who said, anonymously, this person is a bully. And so that came out, and everyone was surprised that the person had, that everyone was surprised that that a person was named, but it was kind of like the elephant in the room. This person had the courage to name the elephant in the room. And it wasn't as much of a sense of belonging as it was someone being aggressive and disrespectful. So that's very different from belonging.
So what do you specifically do in such situations? Do you leave it to the leadership to take care of it, or how do you deal with it?
In this case, I made recommendations to the people who brought me in.
Right.
And I know that this person is still employed with the company. And I know that they have made some changes. They've followed some of the recommendations that I've made, but not all of them.
Right, right. This is really interesting. Like, as I said in the beginning of the podcast, like, there's so much depth into belongingness that we spent 40 minutes talking about it. So, I want to shift gears and talk about this interesting story you had where you had the chance of meeting former President Barack Obama. And I remember my friend telling me that it was one of your goals, dreams to meet him. So tell us about that experience. How did you make it happen? What was the experience meeting him, talking to him?
Sure. So it was definitely it was a highlight of my life to have the opportunity to meet him. I won't say that it was a goal because I don't know that I would have ever thought it was possible.
Right.
But one of the reasons it was so important for me to have the opportunity to meet him is because I'm a biracial person and because I was raised in a white family. And in our society, at least in the US, there have not been many adults who are biracial who, in my opinion, are their whole, are authentic and who present themselves in a way that I admire. And
Right.
Former President Obama, is one of those people. He is also biracial. He's raised in a largely white society. And I've always appreciated that for me, he comes across as genuinely human, not necessarily trying to be perceived as more black or as more white. He has just seemed to come across as a male human being. And so he has been a role model for me to focus on presenting who I am as a person. And so for me to have the opportunity to get to meet him and let him know that was life-changing. So I got that opportunity because I was in a leadership role. He was the keynote speaker for an international conference that was hosted by an organization, the Association for Talent Development. It's an organization for corporate training that I've been involved with forever. And I happen to be on the international board of directors for ATD, or the Association for Talent Development, the year that he was the keynote speaker. So as part of the contract with him, there was the agreement that he would meet with 50 people. And because I was on the international board of directors, I got to be one of those 50 people.
Wow, that's amazing. And what are the conversations like when you met him? What did you talk to him?
It was a very short conversation. I was probably
Right.
under a minute from beginning to end. But he shook my hand. He asked me my name and where I was from. He said that he really liked Raleigh. It's a nice town. And then I got to tell him that he, as a biracial adult, that he's been a role model for me. And he thanked me and said that he really appreciated that. And
Right.
then we took our picture.
Do you think, I've never personally met any of my role models, but like you've met your role model. Do you think anything changed after meeting that role model, like mentally or like things you do? Did you do anything differently?
For me, it reiterated the importance of saying thank you.
Right.
And it's, I don't know how much it meant to him, but it meant a lot to me to be able to thank him. And that's probably the biggest thank you I've ever given in my life. But it reminds me of, saying thank you not only contributes to the other person, but it contributes to you as well. So I think I think that's probably the biggest way that I've been changed by it. But I also really appreciate that opportunity came because I was in a volunteer role. I've been part of that association as a volunteer, as a member and as a volunteer for over 20 years. And I got that opportunity because I was in a role of service. And it was genuine service. It is a passion of mine. It is an honor for me to give back. And I got this opportunity because of a volunteer role that was important to me.
That's amazing. Yeah. I hope one day I meet one of my role models and I get to share my story of like what things changed. And
So tell me, who's one of your role models?
I think initially when I was a kid, I used to, think of these superstars, movie stars, or like cricket players, sports players as my role models. But as I grew up, I started thinking of my dad as my role model because he's worked hard, like he portrays all the values, the things you need to do to be successful. So I've always learned from him. But apart from him, if I have to meet anyone, there's this one cricketer called Virat Kohli. He's an Indian cricketer. He upholds the practice of discipline, go after what you want. So it would be great to meet him. And I think another person, like say in the tech field, at least for me right now, would be Elon Musk. Like that man has built like 5 great companies. So it would be an honor to meet him as well.
Okay.
So yeah. Uh, Professor Wendy, the next question I want to ask you is, you are a public speaker. So are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm right over the edge of right over the line on being an extrovert. So there are times when I love being around people, and it really energizes me to have conversations. But then there are times where I don't want to be around other people, where I need to be away from most people and from outside stimulation to
Right.
recharge. So I am both, but I am just a little bit more extroverted.
Right. So, on occasions where you have a public speaking session, you have to deliver in front of a bunch of people, but you don't have that energy, like say on that particular day, what do you usually do, like to make sure that you deliver your best presentation or your speech?
I have a pre-presentation practice. Part of that includes listening to music that gets me hyped up, that gets me energized. I know that for some people, before they do a presentation, they need to calm down. They want to
Right.
ground themselves and calm down. For me, I want to get hyped up and energized. So I listen to music that is music that I would always want to dance to. Anytime I hear it, I have a pre-presentation playlist. So I will play that music, and that gets me in a hyped up, energized frame of mind. I focus on thinking about why I was brought to this opportunity and what the people in the seats, what my audience needs to hear from me that will help them when they leave the auditorium, when they, when they go back to work or when they go back home. What is it that I can share with them that will improve their life? And it can be small. I don't put a huge burden or a huge
Right.
responsibility on myself. I want to share, I want you to leave my presentation feeling like, oh my gosh, I can do that.
Yeah, right. True.
So
So, what is your go-to songs or go-to playlist before you deliver your presentation?
one of the songs is Dream Lover from Mariah Carey. And the reason that is a go-to song for me is because that was the song that was playing on the radio when I had the stoplight experience.
Oh, what is
My
that?
stoplight story. So the stoplight story is, you've seen the video that explains part of it, but the stoplight story is that I was driving, I was by myself in my car, I was listening to Mariah Carey's song on the radio and I was singing with her. I pulled up at a stoplight and on one side of me was a car of black women. On the other side of me was a car of white women. And out of nowhere, I flipped out because I wasn't sure who I should try to be the same as. Should I try to fit in with the black women in this car, or should I try to fit in with the white women in this car? Now, it wasn't these women saying, you need to fit with us or you don't fit with us.
Correct.
It was me. It was my head. And it was at that point when my voice said, what about me? What do I want? And the answer to that question was, I want to sing this song with Mariah Carey on the radio. So that's one of my go-to songs, and I've got a couple others. But the idea is to have music for me, to listen to some music beforehand that gets me in the right frame of mind, that helps me bring the kind of energy that I want to give to my audience.
Right. And speaking about presentations, you've delivered a ton of them to, especially to leaders, to various company employees. What are some learnings you had, like, by delivering presentations, and like, what are some tips to, deliver great presentations?
In some of the consulting that I do with leaders who are preparing for presentations, what I often hear is, oh my gosh, this audience is out to get me. We think that the audience is against us, that they are looking for every tiny little flaw. That's just not true. I encourage the people that I work with, even the students that I work with, to think about when someone else is standing in the front of the room or when they're on stage, do you want them to fail?
Right.
No, you don't.
No,
You
yeah.
want to hear something that's beneficial for you. You want to be entertained. You want to be inspired. You want to be educated. You don't want it to be a waste of your time. So
Correct.
the audience is rooting for you. The audience is cheering for you. They want you to succeed. So that shift, being able to make that one shift and remembering that the audience is on your side, can often go a long way to help alleviate a lot of the anxiety that many people feel before they do a big presentation.
Right. Right. Uh, the other fact is that there are so many people with the fear of public speaking. I think like that's one of the biggest fears in the world, where people are really scared to present in front of an audience. And I think the main reason is because there are so many eyes on you, and like it's not a general setting that you're at. Uh, like, did you have a fear of public speaking before?
I probably did, but before I became a professional speaker, I was also, I've been a trainer. And as a trainer, as a corporate trainer, you do a lot of presentations in smaller groups. So I've had over 20 years of experience, delivering presentations to audiences of all sizes.
Right.
So I'm sure that I'm not saying that I've never been anxious or nervous before a presentation, but I don't know that I would say that I had the same kind of fear that I've seen in others.
Right. What would be that one tip you would give people who are fear of speaking publicly, to let go of that fear and do it authentically and, without fear?
I would say don't aim to get rid of the fear, because I think that the fear is actually a good sign. It means that you are invested, that you want to do a good job, and that's good. So that's one piece of advice, is to Don't aim to not be afraid, because then if you are afraid, you think, oh my gosh, and that actually shifts a lot of your mental energy.
Right.
I would also say to practice. Say what you might say out loud. Practice out loud. I don't mean to memorize what you're going to say. I don't like the idea of memorizing something verbatim.
Right.
But the idea of practicing out loud, and I would say the higher the stakes are for the presentation, the more you should practice out loud at least 5 times. Because what happens is, as you are saying stuff out loud, your ears and your brain are hearing what you're saying, which helps your memory. Saying it 5 times actually creates a deeper,
Imprint.
you are remembering it. It creates a deeper memory for you than simply reading, silently reading. And that means that the deeper the memory is, the easier it is to recall, which means that there's less mental focus that you have to spend trying to remember what you're going to say, which frees up a lot of mental energy and you can focus that mental energy on connecting with your audience.
Right. That is true. That is true. So, as a consultant, you help out a lot of leaders in delivering presentations. What are like 3 things that you like? What are the patterns you've noticed with these leaders when they're delivering presentations that you help them on?
I see many of them have way too much information on their slides. They also often end up using their slides as their script,
Right.
which is the number one thing that audiences hate, is when there are so many words on the slide and when the presenter reads the slides to them. So what I see is many speakers think that they need, how am I going to know what to say if it's not on the slide? That's not the purpose of your slides. The fewer words there are on your slides, the less you'll come across as simply reading them.
Right.
So too many words on slides, feeling a dependence on slides, and many leaders think they don't have the time to practice. You should see the reactions I get when I say you should plan to practice out loud at least 5 times. When I say that, I don't mean that you need to be in the conference room or on the stage presenting, in the actual same environment where you're going to deliver your presentation. You can be driving your car and practicing it out loud. You can be cooking. You can be in the gym, on the treadmill. It doesn't matter where you are when you say it out loud, but it's literally the act of your brain hearing what you're saying helps create deeper memory.
Right. I think last question about the presentations part is generally when making slides, as you said, people generally put a lot of content which is not effective. But I think the main problem people have is they don't know what content to remove. Like, do they remove the points or do they remove specific pictures? So how do you go about making your slides?
So what I do, what I've found is that as soon as we put something on the slide, we're committed to it being there. We think it needs to be there. So what I do is, if I'm in a situation where I am going to have a handout or a report, I will create the handout or the report first. That's where all the detail goes. So then when it comes to creating slides, when I open up PowerPoint is creating slides is actually the last step in my presentation process. instead of the first step. I outline what I'm going to say. I may type up detail what I think I might say. I'll call it a script, but
Right.
it's not a script. Then I will create the handout or the report. Then when I go into PowerPoint, instead of typing on the slide, I actually type the details in the slide notes. And then I will pull the essence or the gist, the key message of what all of that text is. And it's that key message, those short key phrases that go on the slide instead of the complete sentences and instead of the paragraphs that might be in the handout or the report. But the paragraphs don't go on the slide.
Right, got it. I think that was really insightful. Thank you so much for sharing. So, I think this has been an amazing conversation. I've learned so much about belongingness, and I want to thank you for doing that research for so many years, because I think there are so many people who are not self-aware about like if they actually belong with oneself, with their community, workplace. And so, thank you so much for doing that, and thank you so much for having this conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I have really enjoyed our conversation. I really
Thank you so much,
appreciate it.
Wendy. Thank you so much. So, this is it, folks. I hope you really enjoyed this conversation. I am Sid, and this is Lucid.